Welcome to the GreenPilled.network podcast. In September, GreenPill will be hosted by the Cartographers, a high-context community of individuals and teams dedicated to advancing the Web3 grants ecosystem. They'll explore the Web3 grants ecosystem with topics ranging from novel funding mechanisms, grant councils, and governance to emerging trends like AI and direct-to-contract incentives. This series seeks to bridge theory and practice by examining real world examples and featuring discussions with those who are closest to the action. The next voice you hear will be Sav, who contributes at Gitcoin and founded the Cartographers. Sav will be hosting this entire season. And I think that it's going to be a great season because Sav brings deep experience in Web3 grants and capital allocation. I'm excited for you to hear some of the perspectives from him and his guests. Without further ado, the next voice you'll hear is Sav. Enjoy.
What's up, Coordination? Sav here. Want to introduce you to the third episode in the Cartographers GreenPill season takeover. This episode focuses on the Sunny Awards. The Sunnies is a collaboration between Gitcoin, where I contribute, Open Source Observer, Charmverse, and then the Optimism Collective to launch a first-of-its-kind awards program. It looks at the ways that metrics can drive incentives and some interesting new approaches that we're just starting to explore. I'm excited for you to listen to this episode, and hopefully you get something from it. So let's jump into some introductions first. Carl, as the elder statesman of GreenPill, I'll start with you.
Hey, it's great to be back on the GreenPill podcast. As some of you know, my name is Carl. I work on Open Source Observer, and we're building technology to measure impact in the open. And we're so excited to be doing that with the Optimism community on the Sunny Awards. To Chris, yeah.
Great to be here, everyone. My name is Chris Corella. I'm the head of product at Charmverse and the co-founder of the Scout game. I'm also a member of the Optimism Citizens House and just generally involved in the various initiatives happening around optimism. And so Charmverse built the software to register your project for the Sunny Awards. And so we've been just a part of this great collaboration and looking forward to driving it to the finish line.
Hey all, I'm Binji. I have been a contributor to the Optimism Collective for 2.5 years, starting initially at OP Labs. I'm currently at Optimism Unlimited, helping growth within the superchain and of the superchain in itself. And it's an honor to be here, so thanks for having me.
Nice. Well, let's jump into it. The first question I will actually turn over to you, Binji. The Sunnies for me started as a DM from you in Slack around, I've got this idea, and we'd been excited for some time to figure out some ways that we can collaborate with this group, from a Gitcoin perspective. So maybe introduce us just to the concept of the Sunnies, what the vision was for that and, where we are today with it.
Yeah. So if you look at what builders want in the space, and you also look at what users want in the space, sometimes it doesn't always directly overlap over the idea that we all want the space to grow, right? So let's zone in on builders. Like we initially started with this plan for helping base out on On-Chain Summer and being a part of this like broader movement to like bring really strong collective energy for the superchain and like for everyone involved who's building in crypto over the summer. So we first went down to the builder track. It's like, okay, builders, they want good tech, reliable technology. Awesome, right? We're very fortunate to have built like the OP stack, which is resilient, which is reliant, is being used by Fortune 500s and all the types of developers alike. And it's growing more and more into the superchain. So that's one. Let's say that's covered. Two is they want sustainability, right? They want to find grants programs. Like, how can I go and like build something in the crypto space? Like, how do I sustain myself? Maybe I want to make my thing open source. So that's two. We do have grants programs, right? That it does exist. There's multiple grants programs in crypto. I think there's billions of dollars worth of grants programs in crypto today across all these different chains. So that's two. Three is what I think is hard part that has not necessarily been designed for to a large extent, and was one thing that the Sunnies kind of wanted to lead with, which is marketing and visibility and promotion for these projects. You can have good tech, you can have grants, but after that, you build your thing, and it's like, okay, how do I actually get promoted? How do I actually get recognition? How do I get visibility? So the Sunnies, putting all three together, it's almost a grants program with marketing built in at the forefront. It's a promotion campaign as much as it is a grants campaign. So how can we kind of align both of those incentives and kind of create a one-size-fits-all approach for any builder that's applying to something like the Sunnies, where they can potentially get some OP, they can also potentially get some recognition, some visibility, some users. And on the user side, you can actually culminate this in a fun award show that anyone may want to come and enjoy, regardless if they're a builder or not.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's been exciting to see it getting spun up for sure. So there's kind of two parts that I want to dig into here as well. One that builder experience, what does that look like? And then two, how are we actually verifying, impact and what do those systems look like? So maybe I'll pop it over to you, Chris, maybe talking through the profiles, some of the work that Charmverse has done, and kind of like what that front end builder experience looks like, for the Sunnies.
Yeah, so signing up for the Sunnies is actually very easy. You can sign in with your Warpcast account or sign in with your wallet and just apply for your project. It's like not a lot of information like grants programs typically ask for. It's like a name, a short description, and just maybe your social accounts. So the user experience there is actually very straightforward. The interesting thing behind it is we sort of got started on this because we've been doing a bunch of work with Optimism on their identity solutions and their attestations. And so if you want to apply for Retro PGF now, or even if you want to apply for Optimism Grants Council, you're required to have a Farcaster account. And Optimism is treating your Farcaster account or your FID as kind of your universal identity. And it has the benefits. Your FID has connected wallets to it. And so if you need to rotate your wallets or a wallet gets compromised, you can reconnect a new wallet, but your FID is the same. It also has the benefits of like very simple email-based account recovery. And so these are pain points that many grants programs and Optimism has faced over the years where, if you lose access to your wallet, that can be a problem. If you need to rotate your wallet, the foundation is planning on sending your grant to the initial wallet. You need to contact someone. There's like a lot of human intervention involved to make sure the right wallet is going to get paid out. And so they moved to this notion of Farcaster IDs as your identity and then a series of attestations on top of it. And so the Sunnies just use this entire system. And when you do create a project, in fact, once you create an account, you're now sort of in the Optimism Builder Registry and the Superchain Builder Registry, where they can start to piece together all of your activities in the space. But as soon as you apply as a project, you now have a project attestation. And that project attestation then becomes portable across the Optimism ecosystem. So if you do apply for a Retro PGF, or if you do apply for the Grants Council's program, you sign in with your Warpcast account and you just have this project that you can easily pull in and not redupe all the information. And furthermore, it starts earning attestations. And so your project can win a Sunny Award. It can win an OP grant. It can win a Retro PGF grant. And now there are attestations against those projects so that we can sort of track your projects across the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, interesting. And Carl, obviously, I'll turn it over to you from here to talk a little bit about what's the potential that unlocks as we look at, those things happening on chain, and how does that start to give more possibilities for builders and even grant programs and capturing profile information in this way and being able to verify impact, those kinds of things.
Yeah, building on a couple of things that both Chris and Binji said, I think first off, we really wanted the sign-up process to be as easy and as frictionless as possible. You don't want projects hitting a wall of questions and then giving up because it just takes too much time or there's information they don't have and they need to come back and forget about it, et cetera. So one of the goals was that it should be, again, as easy as possible to sign up. And then the information that we'd get about the project in order to track different types of metrics would all come from a contractor, a series of contracts linked to that project. The great thing about any impact that is on the superchain is that we should be able to look at the contracts and identify everything that they've deployed, all the different user activity, because a lot of the projects are focused on users that are on Farcaster. You're also able to link Farcaster IDs and identify a rich set of metrics based on just one or two pieces of information from the project. So it's a pretty cool experiment. There are many different categories that we're trying to reward projects in. Some are really well established, like DeFi. Some are entirely kind of new and coming. And so, again, like thinking of the Oscars, where the goal of a ceremony like the Oscars is not only to recognize each of the films, but also to celebrate the film industry and all of the hard work and oftentimes the visible work that goes into that. We really wanted to recognize as many different categories and make it so that if you wanted to kind of understand the impact that a product had, you could, in the same way that you might watch a film, you could actually identify just one or two things about that project, and then everything there is verifiable. It's open. At Open Source Observer, we try and make sense of all that data. So I would say that making it easy for projects to sign on and sign up has meant that we have to do a bit more kind of reviewing and eligibility checks to make sure that everybody's signed up for the right category and so on. But just already a few weeks in, the outpouring's been pretty huge. Tons of projects coming in, lots of interesting categories represented. So very excited to see how it all shakes out.
Nice. Yeah. So
I just wanted to maybe speak to the challenges of doing on-chain
yeah,
metrics, which
that'd be
is
great.
something I've learned the most here. And I'll just say that I first collaborated with Carl on Retro PGF3 when I was just a voter, and he was like, "Hey, I have the data for all of the projects." And so I was first just using his Google Sheets Retro 3 to sort of help inform my evaluation. OP Retro 4 was metrics based, and so that was the first time I really got to see Carl cook. And then now I get to be like much closer to the metal here and watching it happen. And I feel pretty crypto native and have a pretty good handle on how these things work. And then it's like incredibly challenging to actually use metrics as people structure their smart contracts in so many different ways, and including ways where like you may have 1,000 smart contracts downstream that we need to be looking at. And so I would just tell everyone it sounds really simple, like it's metrics based. It probably is the right way to do this, right? It eliminates a lot of biases, eliminates the popularity contest aspect of it. So we love the metrics based stuff, but I just caution the listener that it was actually way more complicated than I had anticipated, and certainly way more complicated than the way you would do this in Web 2.
Would love to add something on this of like, I think what we're seeing here is like a series of very like novel ways to look at crypto data generally. I think the start of Farcaster adds an entire new variable to the idea of like how do you identify who someone is in crypto? Like what is the reputation of someone is like the second question that leads to. Personally, I have like a very biased kind of understanding / like vision that I abide to, which is like reputation is the ultimate cryptocurrency. And I don't think we're there yet in the span of blockchains. I don't think we're like able to kind of like dive into the nitty-gritty that much, but the experimentation, the work that's being done for things like the Sunnies, where it's like, let's like really dive into contracts. Let's see all the various different types of rewards these contracts can get. Like who are the builders of these contracts? What's their Farcaster IDs? Like creating this really open net where you can really start building on top of this idea of reputation, which I think, as I said, is like the ultimate currency. What that leads to down the line is obviously like one, it leads to work for the Optimism Collective, for sure, like and other teams involved as well are like getting attestations on it. But I think broadly, it's like a step forward in what crypto research can be in terms of like how do we actually like look at all this on-chain data and actually prescribe like an award or a superlative or like some sort of like qualitative determinant on top of the data that exists that's more on the quant side. But I think it's like a really cool step forward, and it's really exciting to have all these primitives to work with. It's early and like massive kudos to like all the work that Carl and Chris are doing. Like that is, I've seen those spreadsheets. That is a lot of numbers. Wow.
Carl and Chris definitely cook, yes, for sure. One thing I wanted to, dive into a little bit more with you, Binji, was like some of the comments there around how do you consider factors beyond just like pure numbers, right? Like when you look at like, qualitative, evidence of contributions and builders, I think sometimes we can look at metrics like daily active users, TVL, like all of these things that we know are gameable, but it's kind of just like the best that we have at this point. What have you learned through this process around, some of those softer, factors around just, beyond just pure numbers, right?
Yeah. So I think, critically in crypto, I think there's a lot of cases where we put the cart before the horse, where it's like, this is the thing. And then like the horse just rams into the cart, right? Like, I think what this Sunnies kind of does is like, let's get as much of this data as people are like can share, right? Like let's get these contract addresses and everything. And then let's award a variety of awards, not just top TVL, but maybe fastest growing TVL, for example, or something around that side. Like, let's not silo into just like seeing TVL as one metric. Like TVL is there, sure, but it doesn't have to be top TVL. It could be like fastest growing, the TVL with the most users, all these different things. And these are things that we're working on. So I can't make any promises directly on like what those awards will be and don't want to spoil it. But like, it is kind of this idea that we shouldn't necessarily think of these as like, you're the winner of TVL. Like that itself has so much nuance. So we're looking at it in terms of like not putting the cart before the horse by saying this is the award that we're going to have, but actually like getting the metric data in and being able to see like trends and different things that help award a variety of builders, not just like the top ones on a volume perspective. I think in crypto, it's very important to do that in an industry that's pre-PMF. If we keep rewarding the same thing on a metric that we ourselves are not fully convinced on, then it'll just lead to like a self-fulfilling prophecy where we miss out on a ton of other builders building a ton of new primitives. we're so early in the space that we should not reward people who are just doing the best on one metric. We should reward people who are showing up and like pushing the frontiers as well, equally as much, and encourage them as much as possible.
Just building on what Binji said, I think there's a very cool way that data is going to enrich the experience of like choosing categories and choosing projects, but at the same time, it's not going to be deterministic. So what I mean by that is the goal here is really to reward a whole range of different types of contributions, different categories, products that are well established, ones that are up and coming. And so, the metrics, if anything, they will be used as a way of kind of filtering and informing those kind of categories and the awards within a given category. But ultimately, when you're at the scale where you have hundreds, potentially thousands of projects that are applying, you need some heuristics and some way of categorizing things. Hopefully, what we'll see is that there's a huge number of projects. The number one thing they get out of this is kind of the marketing, the support. Hopefully, this leads to, as Binji was saying, some kind of continuous funding or on-ramping to getting other grants programs. But right now, if we can put the net out, get as many products as possible, and then find different ways of categorizing them and rewarding different things that they're uniquely contributing to, it's it's really a big step forward.
Would like to add one part here as well. Is like one of the biggest things in the Sunnies, I think that I'm really happy that like to be a movement that has done this is the free access to analytics that teams and projects have gotten. What that leads to is like different chains, because there's so many different data points. Like everyone focuses on TVL, or everyone focuses on like one or two things, but there's like a whole variety of data points.
Right.
Making those accessible across these projects can not only help the projects realize and like further analyze, okay, how am I doing? But it could also let other ecosystems that may want to do their own grants programs actually leverage this. So for example, some chains through the Optimism Collective recently got grants, right? So these are like OP given to chains for them to run their own grants programs. Now they can actually like see from their ecosystem, like who actually went to the Sunnies, see all this data and potentially even like start thinking about who to reward on a variety of metrics instead of siloing into one. And I think the reproducibility of that is really powerful. I think furthermore, like working with Gitcoin and using Easy Retro PGF for this is also another system of like, okay, like we have used this system, it works, we battle tested it like with the Sunnies. Now there's all these other folks in the collective and perhaps even outside the collective who could also like leverage this toolkit, leverage this system and run their own versions of this. I think like a big success case is that like people do this on their own as well, like mini round ones or like whatever. But I do think it's a really interesting way to push in this new idea of what grants can be, where you're not just rewarding the people who are at the top, but you're rewarding people who are there, who are showing up, who are doing new things across a variety of different metrics.
Absolutely. And you could be targeted around, certain types of builders. Before we jump into the decision-making part, Chris, I wanted to get your perspective as a creator, as someone who subscribes to your hypersub and loves the work that you do. How do you look at this, right? Because I think oftentimes when it comes to educational content, art, like creative, qualitative type work, it's been more challenging in the past to reward that. There haven't been as many incentive programs around it. And that I view that as like a huge opportunity here with, Farcaster really lifting up a lot of those types of creators like yourself. How do you view the opportunity with the Sunnies and maybe even like some of those next order grant programs that could come from it?
Yeah, so maybe two lenses. One is that I have not applied with any of my personal stuff just because I'm working on it, although I have no say in the decision-making process, but it just feels like I should not be applying for it. But I do have FOMO from not applying. And I would say it's like, there's like a cool Farcaster frame when you apply. There's a cool Farcaster frame around your metrics. Like the awards show is going to be really cool. I would love for my projects to be up there. So on one hand, I have like the FOMO of some of the marketing around it. But I think kind of the juicy part of the question is how do we evaluate on-chain metrics for artists and creators, which certainly is much harder. And I think that the long-term answer for a lot of this stuff is to have grants programs focused on artists. Binji led We Love the Art a few months ago. That was like an example. OP had the creator airdrop, which was a good example. But it was very hard when you're like, my most successful NFT, which by the way, this is like, I just crushed them all with these NFTs. I got 20,000 mints, but it's still like very hard to compare my impact of 20,000 mints against like Aerodrome's 300,000 DeFi users, And so I think like in the big picture, having artists competing against other applications can be challenging. I see this across many grants ecosystems. I think for us here, we're like looking at the art category and the artist separate than the DeFi stuff. And so it is not going to be apples to apples. Culture does have a huge impact. It's not always as verifiable on chain, but I think trying to keep things metrics based, even for creators, means that you have some demonstrable impact on chain. And a great one for artists is onboarding new people onto chain. Like my favorite metric in all of this stuff across all of the grants programs is how many qualified users do you onboard into a chain, which is a hard metric because I don't want to count bots in there. I want to count qualified users, and so that's a tricky heuristic itself. But that's kind of what I always think is like, how many people can I onboard into a new chain when I'm doing a new piece of work on a new piece of chain, or what is my demonstrable on-chain impact? I'm an on-chain artist, so that's where I'm trying to make my impact.
Goosebumps, absolutely. I think you mentioned we love the art, and like one of the things that I remember from that was the amount of evangelism that we were able to like get from artists, and also like really like learn from artists and like almost help make this contest that was like on a blockchain, but it wasn't necessarily like restricted by it. We Love the Art ended up being like one of the largest mobily accessible art contests ever. It's not regionally defined. Anyone could have applied. And I think that sort of stuff is really powerful. And it did beg the question. We had a lot of these focus groups on how can blockchains actually help artists? Like, what does that mean? And that's a very separate conversation from how can a blockchain help a DeFi person? But if we evaluate both of those like in the same metric, you kind of like end up in this redundant state where like it may not necessarily reward the entire collective, which I think is pretty powerful and important to do, especially in this pre-TMF era. I love like this Einstein quote, which is everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its entire life believing that it's stupid. And like everybody is contributing to the crypto economy, but if you judge everyone off of this one thing that even we like, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, because there's so much more that's expansive and like can grow outside of that. And we should be welcoming to everyone who comes in to contribute, who has a good heart, who has like good intentions in mind, and who actually cares about like the mission itself, which I think is like, if you have that, like if you have enough people that care, in my opinion, you've won to a large degree. That's oftentimes the hardest part.
Let's jump in a little bit to decision making, right? So as we were talking about a little bit before we clicked record on the show, I view the Sunnies as kind of like one layer above direct contract incentives, right? So for the audience, direct contract incentives are you're encoding those incentives at a contract layer, and if certain criteria is met, those incentives are kind of like automatically paid out. I think right now there's excitement around the opportunity with direct contract incentives, but also some hesitation because those could be gameable, and you could find yourself in a situation that could get out of control quick. Here, you get the benefit of gathering all that on-chain data, but then there's human decision-making that happens at the end of that process in terms of actually rewarding and paying out the incentives. So maybe, Carl, we'll start with you. Like, talk us through from your side what that process looks like. Like, once we have the data, how does decision-making occur with the Sunnies?
First off, I guess we don't have all the data yet, and we're not sure how the decision-making is going to occur. So that's still very much a work in progress, and it's going to evolve based on which categories have more projects in them and what types of metrics we discuss and think are most useful. But like high level, what I'd say is that, actually coming back to the point that Chris made earlier, it's not really fair to compare an NFT project with a payment project, with a DeFi project. But where I think the opportunity is that you could take a platform for artists like Zora, and they could say, right now we have a campaign which is really all about onboarding new artists. And so what we want to do is zoom in on that domain and identify just the subset of projects that are having a lot of impact there, and maybe offer some kind of continuous funding or their own version of a grants program. At the same time, maybe another partner like Base, they could say, we care a lot about payments right now. And specifically, we care about payments that are going into markets that are not well supported by the banking sector. And so they could be very specific in using the same data and customizing their parameters and what they want to reward. So in terms of like what we're actually going to do, I think we're going to be really scratching the surface in terms of how these metrics and how these categories might inform future grant making. But the benefit is by having a pretty large registry of products that are signed up, that have gotten some recognition, that have gotten some motivation through this, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for others to pile on and help fund these projects more. I know, Binji, I know that you're probably scheming about what the evaluations are going to look like. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think what I like, a term I'm trying here is this idea of an impact mosaic. Like, you know how mosaics are just like distinct pieces, but they all fit together as one big thing? I think that's what a collective is. Right? That's what a community is. That's what a country is. That's like all of that. An impact mosaic kind of allows like these various different types of people to like get an award for this, and get an award for that. Those happen in silos today, right? Like that happens in, let's say We Love the Art, that was just artists and mainly the art community, and that's it. We didn't have DeFi people tuning in on that, right? But that just was separated. I think with the Sunnies, we're creating an impact mosaic where everyone's going to come into this live stream. Everyone's going to come into this one umbrella, have the Sunnies umbrella, and they're going to get like an artist may get a certain award, which is like, you are the most minted artist. Another artist may get another award, which is like, you are the most up and coming artist potentially. Like these are the sort of like different types of mosaic items that will most likely come into play. And it's one of those things where like, as we get this data coming in, we need to like see patterns and trends to then like add on to the mosaic itself. But I think we have a very expansive set of information that we could lead with generally, and there's various ways to kind of push into that. Things that there still need to be worked out for sure, but it's really exciting to see like the outpouring of like 2,000 plus projects or something like coming in right now. I forget what number we're at exactly, but it's a lot for sure. And these are projects, like not even like an individual builder. These are just full startups and NFT projects as well. So it's really exciting to see. I think largely it's whatever best fits the broader impact mosaic itself will be what I think will be eligible for awards. But the awards will be very eclectic for sure. I imagine that. Like it's definitely not just going to be siloed within a couple things. I imagine it'll be pretty expensive.
Yeah,
So
just kind of thinking
when we-
ahead, there's all sorts of different ways that you could go about this. So on the one hand, you have more than 12 chains that are participating. Some are very well established, like Base and OP Mainnet and Zora. Some are really up and coming. This might be the first time the products building on those chains are going to get any funding for that. So there's the whole element of what chain are you on and how much activity is there, and are you kind of on the cutting edge of whatever's happening on that chain. Then there's the 20 or so categories that we have, and then like you said, there's all sorts of different angles that you can look at. So on the one hand, you can look at pure kind of economic metrics. You can look at things that are related to users. I don't know how it'll shake out, but my guess is there's probably going to be like more than 50, potentially 100 different types of awards that will come through.
Yeah. And one thing that's exciting about this is like, okay, we expand the scope of what is awarded, right? Like it's like, let's say in the past, like grants programs, et cetera, are like, we're going to award the team that does the most transactions, right? And then it just goes towards that, and it gets very top heavy in that world. In this world, we could be like, transactions, one metric. Within the metric of transactions, there can be multiple awards. You could be the top transacting team. You could be the transacting team with the most users, recurring transactions daily. Like you could be the team that has like grown the most. There's various different ways to take this one metric and like have it about multiple awards versus just one award that's just purely volume based. What that does is if we kind of normalize that within the collective and we normalize that within crypto, it like fixes the problem. That's far. But it works towards fixing this problem / like gives an entertaining solution to this idea of sustainable, consistent funding. How can a collective consistently fund everyone that's like within it? One of the things that I've heard a lot of people, why people wouldn't want to do that and like have streams running constantly, is that like it'll end up too top heavy. Some team might get too big and like they just consistently receive funding, and like the smaller up and coming teams have no funding whatsoever. But you have these just diverse awards that are giving funding out to like teams that are growing really fast, teams that have grown, teams that are doing different things. Over time, as that gets more and more, like as that gets strengthened, you could imagine a world where it's just an automatic drip stream to people achieving certain like metrics under these awards that we already have. Definitely far out there, but I do think it sets the foundations of like how can we expand the scope of what is awarded and rewarded in crypto.
Great segue into my next question, which I'll turn to Chris first. How do you view kind of like these types of incentives reshaping, grants and incentives as we move forward, and maybe a little bit of a plug for the work that you guys are doing around the Scout game? I could definitely see where, like being able to identify those builders and almost creating markets for those types of builders could be really interesting. So what are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, so I think to maybe roll back and think about why do ecosystems have grants programs. And a lot of it is to incentivize development in their ecosystem. And from that, way you can think about. There's one end, there's like very expensive grants programs, which can be really great. Retroactive is easier because you're measuring previous impact. Proactive grant funding is difficult, and it's almost like being a VC. So it's a pretty expensive thing to do, and you'll have some hits and you'll have some misses. And then on the far end of that, other side of that is like you may use hackathons for the same thing, where you're trying to get new developers interested in building in the chain, right? And so I think what we're all talking about in various ways, and what we're trying to do with the Scout game too, is like, what is that middle ground where based on metrics, we can determine your impact and reward you for your everyday work, not your apply for this grant every 3 months. And one of the kind of amazing effects for this is just stability of income. And so it can be really hard if you're a project working off of grants and then you're crushing it. You kind of expect you're going to get a grant, and then for whatever reason, you don't. Like maybe your category wasn't chosen this time, or the metrics were chosen in a different way. And then you have like this very spiky way of trying to run a project or a company. And so the more work we can do around metrics and on-chain data, and the more work we can do around continuous grants and direct contract incentives, I think the more we can like stabilize the life of a lot of projects. And so they just know what to expect this year and what to expect next year. You say in the Nouns ecosystem, they're also experimenting with just streaming grants. And so there's a bucket of money, and people vote where they want their part of the money to be streamed to. And so then rather than and it's continuous. And so a new project comes up today, and I decide the project that I directed my stream to last week doesn't need it anymore. I can like change my stream towards this new project and give them a boost. And so, but TLDR, I think there's a lot of ways to spur activity in the ecosystem. There's a lot of ways to reward people's impact. And I think we're all together as an industry getting a little bit better at this towards kind of smoother revenue for teams and more predictable outcomes based on their data.
How do you think about that, Carl? What are some of the possibilities you see?
I think about it a lot, obviously. The thing that I certainly worry about, and others have said, we even had, I think, a whole episode on the GreenPilled podcast about this, is just that once you put a metric out there, it becomes a target and everybody's working towards objective. They've turned that into an objective. They're gamifying it. They're really just trying to maximize that number. So the metrics that are used, they have to be evolutionary. They have to respond based on what the market is doing and how others in the environment are responding. The thing that's like hopefully a big unlock through this and work that will come afterwards is that right now, standing up a grants program has so much overhead. It just takes a ton of work to figure out the design, how much funding you allocate, how you get all the projects in, how you organize them, how you have the whole operations about vetting their activity, proving their reputation, etc. And then all of that is necessary before you can even start coming up with ways of categorizing and ranking the projects. So there's a huge amount of work that goes into it. And for most people, that work is not the fun part. That is not the high value part. It's just the necessary work that has to get done in order to decide how you're going to allocate the funding. So what I'd like to see is that ideally we get to a place where things like the builder registry is ready to go. Things like the proof of work and the proof of impact is already baked in. And so governance and the people that are administering the grant program, they can spend all of their time on trying to look at how the different actors have responded and tweaking the funding. I want there to be predictable funding for projects that are having an impact. I don't want grant programs to have to spend tons of hours gathering all this data, because the impact should be there, it should be provable, it should be verifiable. The thing where they really need to spend their attention is making sure that over time, as products are changing, as the incentives are changing, they're reflecting the way that they reward things to always stay ahead of the curve. Hopefully, again, with things like what we're building right now, so much more of like the human part is going to be kind of looking at the overall how products are responding and tweaking things to make sure that those that are still having the most impact are getting rewarded the most.
What do you see that way in terms of AI LLM? Maybe talk us through, is AI LLM used today in open source observer and, with the Sunnies, do you see possibilities where that could kind of help, take the human workload and those types of things and improve it in the future?
When designing AI systems, there's, concept of, reinforcement learning through human feedback. And I think in the case of allocating grant funding, that human feedback is really, really important, especially in determining, does this reward function actually make sense given what we care about? I think the values and, what the ecosystem stands for, that's, the foreseeable future, that's still going to be set by humans. That's going to be set by the community and making sure that you have a good pulse on what the community values. But certainly, as you get more and more projects and more data about those, AI models are going to be very helpful in trying to curate and predict which things are likely to have the most impact. On our end, we've only started to scratch the surface with that, because a lot of the work right now is really just kind of labeling and processing and cleaning up the data. Hopefully, we're going to get to the other side of that pretty soon. But I would be cautious about running too fast towards trying to take out that valuable role that humans play. I think right now, as Binji said a number of times, we're still pre-product market fit as a sector. We don't know why users are here. We don't know what's going to make them stay. We don't really know which apps, if they get a certain amount of grant funding, are going to continue building and focusing on the ecosystem. So all of that's going to take a lot of trial and error and experiments. Let's use LLMs and models to help make our work easier, but I think we still have to put in the hard work to figure out what we actually want to value and build up the proof points that we can actually fund these things effectively.
Binji, maybe I'll let you kind of close us out, right? Maybe let us know kind of the current state of the Sunnies. Can people still apply? How do they find information on that? When are we thinking that, we might be announcing, some of the applicants? And then maybe share with us, you've already have kind of through this conversation, but just vision for the future that way in terms of what this could mean to the wider super chain.
Yeah, awesome. So Sunnies are still open. You could go to the sunnyawards.fund and apply. Please do so as soon as possible. We will be monitoring the data, assigning awards based off the objective data that teams provide. Please provide like everything in tune. If you ever have a question, there's like a Ticketmaster's channel on Telegram. You can come in, hop in there and ask any questions that you may have as you go on and apply. We will end things with a live stream, and I'm very excited about that. So how can we make like the actual Oscars come to be, right? Like actually like a full live stream, like you come in, you present, you like receive an award, you give a little speech, things like that. That's something that we're collaborating on across all of our different partners. We're getting more partners involved in that. I've had some really cool conversations with some very cool people who are interested in doing skits there. So please keep on the lookout there. The Optimism handle and all the other handles that are involved in the Sunnies will be giving you updates on like when to RSVP and such as that moves on. I think broadly, like there's a couple parts here. So one is the way that the Sunnies has been built is something that we're all very excited by, because there's about 8 teams who've never worked together directly with each other, who collaborated and made this possible across a variety of different segments, right? Like there's marketing, there's product, there's data, there's everything in between. There's grants, there's delivery, all of these sort of things. And I think it's a testament to how we can do this whole thing. Like we can do this whole crypto thing if we work together. And we can do it way faster than any one of us could do it alone. And I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of such collaborations emerge, like on the super chain in different parts of the crypto economy. Like it is very powerful. And the fact that we're able to do this itself is like an absolute honor. I think the execution of it has been like very exciting to see. We have like thousands of projects already registered. We're doing all these like advancements in like data. We can beginning to think about ways that we can like change grant systems and like have marketing built in on those grant systems and reward people for various different things that they do based on objective on-chain data. That on its own feels like its own like entire world that it'll emerge into. And then on the other side, it's just also like helping people learn about the super chain, helping people learn about what we're trying to do here, creating a fun moment. Like we work so much in this industry of like different things. We're trying out different things that we don't always have a time to rest, like take a step back and actually look at all the stuff that we've done, right? And like we don't get to do that all together. Like imagine every single person in this industry for 1 or 2 hours on this live stream, listening to all the accomplishments that's brought crypto this far, from like a forum post that Satoshi made to what it is today. And I think it's really, really impressive and a testament to like the space as a whole. I'm looking forward for the celebration for sure. And yeah, I think last thing to say, I saw someone tweet today of like founder-led marketing, founder-led BD, founder-led community. And the challenge that I think the Sunny poses that's very different to that is like the best way to do it is actually like user-led community, user-led marketing, user-led BD. And like we've seen that with the entire collective common rally behind this concept. Teams that have really helped us like go really far in marketing this and like talk about it within their communities. And it happens naturally when you can enable a whole collective to go behind a program versus giving it to them. Like it's much better to do it together and make people feel like we are evolving as one versus in the silo.
Well, I think you summed it up really well. As the guy that I'm filling in for on the show for this season often says, it's always coordination and always has been. And I think that that's definitely what we've seen with the Sunnies. So I definitely appreciate you guys jumping on, today and talking through this. Looking forward to this episode releasing, and looking forward to seeing as many applications come in as we can and closing strong and being there for the final ceremonies. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Sav.
Thank you, guys.
So, Coordination, hope you liked the show. That was a lot of fun to talk with those guests. They're doing some pretty cool stuff with the Sunny Awards. So definitely go check out the Sunnies. You'll be able to see that in the call notes where you can register and apply. And definitely keep tabs on some of the work that group of individuals and teams is doing, because there's definitely more to come that way. If you're interested in learning more about, some of the things that are happening across the Optimism Collective, you're in luck. We actually have more of those shows coming up on the GreenPilled podcast for the Cartographer Season Takeover. The next episode I'm going to be doing actually explores downstream grant programs from the Optimism Collective. Tune into that. And then in a later show, we'll even be diving in with the Optimism Grants Council, which I'm a member of, to start to look at the process, kind of mission, intents, and everything that goes into the work that grant council does. So again, I'm glad you're here. Hope you're enjoying the season so far, and there's more to come. Stay tuned.